I was there at the beginning, hired for administrative coordination, while the company was still an idea scribbled on napkins. But from day one I did far more. Fixing pitch decks, drafting HR policies, and translating engineers' jargon into patent filings that wouldn't get laughed out of the USPTO. My name started appearing on those filings not because I demanded credit, but because legal said it was cleaner that way. Less risk of IP disputes when the ghost in the machine had a paper trail. I didn't mind. I preferred working quietly, invisibly. There's power in being underestimated. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. Then whispers of a billion-dollar acquisition surfaced, and Michael Barrett arrived, polished, smug, fresh from Wharton, already treating the place like his personal launch pad. At the first all-hands he announced we needed to streamline, which really meant cutting anyone he didn't understand or value. A week later I was stripped of access. Removed from Slack channels, project dashboards, meetings I'd helped create. No firing, no explanation. Just a quiet demotion. Reclassified as administrative support. Moved to a cubicle near the broken printer, my title erased, my contributions ignored. No one spoke up. Not legal, not engineering, not even the founder who once called me his Swiss Army knife. They watched me get pushed aside and looked away. I didn't rage. I didn't beg. I stayed calm, trained my replacement, Lily, bright-eyed and unprepared, and observed. Watched them fumble through systems I built. Saw them hand my work to interns who couldn't spell proprietary without autocorrect. They wanted the output without the source. The system without the architect. So I began archiving, quietly, carefully. Printing documents, saving files, organizing records. Not for revenge. For protection. Because when you've built the foundation you know how fragile everything else is. And I knew it wouldn't take much for the whole thing to collapse. Because if you spend enough time being the invisible backbone of a company, you learn how fragile everything really is. And honey, this company had no idea how close it was to spinal collapse. The air changed the second the rumors hit Slack. Somebody's cousin's husband knew a recruiter at VenturePath, one of those insatiable cash-stuffed tech behemoths that buys smaller companies like appetizers. Word spread like free donuts in the break room. Suddenly, every desk had a little more posture. Every engineer started brushing their hair again, and LinkedIn saw more profile updates in 48 hours than it had in the past quarter. I watched it all with the same deadpan calm I'd perfected over the last year of being sidelined. You learn to sip your coffee slower, nod more, speak less. My inbox was quiet except for one forwarded thread. An investor update that mistakenly CC'd me. Subject line: Acquisition Trajectory, MVP Team Visibility. My name wasn't there. Not even in the footnotes. But you know whose was? The girl I trained to replace me. Lily. Miss, how do I file a provisional again? Now suddenly listed as a key operational contact. It stung. Not because I needed glory but because it confirmed what I already knew. In their minds I'd been erased. The parts of me they still needed were being scraped off like meat from a bone. No eye contact, no thank yous. Just quiet extraction like I was a printer that still worked even after being kicked down the stairs. Michael Barrett, God bless his teeth-whitened smile, started giving speeches about optics. Said we needed to showcase innovation-forward leadership and clean up org redundancies. Translation: prune anyone over 45 and pretend the interns wrote the damn platform. One by one, the legacy folks got gently let go or nudged into transitional roles. I wasn't fired. No, firing me would mean acknowledging my existence. I was just left out. Cut from the invite list. Left off the briefings. The dashboards I helped build were scrubbed clean of my credentials. The workflows I designed got repackaged in Lily's shiny new Google Docs. I was no longer in meetings. I was setting up chairs for them. The deal was heating up. Word was VenturePath wanted to close within the quarter. The office pulsed with fake urgency, whiteboards filling up with made-up KPIs, everyone trying to look irreplaceable. Michael strutted around like a rooster with a Wall Street Journal tucked under his arm, dropping phrases like vertical synergy and IP leverage without understanding a word of it. I sat through it all, pencil in hand, highlighting old compliance logs. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I knew what they didn't. That the devil lives in the footnotes and our IP history was a minefield if you didn't know where the bodies were buried. Then came the official reorg chart. It hit my inbox like a slap. Lily had been promoted officially into a newly created role, Product Systems Liaison. A Frankenstein title stitched together from words that used to belong to me. No mention of the systems I'd architected. The documentation I'd maintained. The protocols I'd written when we were still using folding tables as desks. My name? Nowhere. I was listed under Admin Pool, Logistics Support. The kind of role you assign to someone who orders sandwiches and schedules toilet repairs. I sat staring at that PDF until the letters blurred. That night I stayed late. Lily had already left. Her screen was still logged into the dashboard she barely understood. I sat at her desk, opened the audit log and downloaded every version I'd touched in the last 5 years. Not to sabotage. To preserve. Things were going to spin out, and I could already smell the smoke. I wanted to make sure there was a record. Not for revenge. For survival. Because here's the thing. No one in that glass-walled conference room understood. Professionalism doesn't mean silence. It means patience. Precision. The slow, methodical stacking of facts like bricks in a wall. And when that wall falls, it'll fall hard. The morning after the org chart went live, Lily walked up to me holding a patent filing I had ghostwritten for the wearable module. "Do you know what this part means?" she asked, tapping the clause about sensor calibration. I smiled, took the document gently and said, "Sure, let me explain." And I did. In detail. Calm, helpful, exact. Because while she was learning to read the manual, I had written it. And I wasn't done writing yet. It started with a manila folder. Not digital, not searchable. Just a plain, creased folder I found buried in the bottom drawer of my old desk. Before the reorg. Before the demotion. Before Michael Barrett with his prefab teeth and quarterly buzzwords swept through like a bleach spill. Inside were early drafts. Original filings. Annotated screenshots. Notes in my handwriting with arrows, footnotes, margin fixes. Back when we still used Sharpies on whiteboards and I'd stay late with engineers to translate their rants into language that wouldn't get us sued. I stared at the folder for a full 10 minutes. Then pulled open the next drawer. I didn't set out to collect. It just happened. Like muscle memory. One folder became 2. 2 became 12. My printer whined under the strain of old compliance reports, patent amendment threads, engineering approval logs. I didn't tamper with anything. Didn't alter a single date or signature. I just archived like a historian watching the empire forget who laid the first bricks. I stored it all in boxes beneath my desk. Labeled not with dates or titles but with feelings. This is when they needed me. This is when they stopped. This is when I knew I was gone. And then without fanfare it happened. A message pinged into my inbox from someone at VenturePath Legal. Formal language, stiff punctuation. They were reviewing patent holdings as part of early-stage due diligence and had come across a filing from 5 years ago that named me as a co-inventor. Would I be willing to verify my contribution for record-keeping? I stared at the email like it had crawled out of the screen. No one had addressed me directly in weeks. Not for anything real. Not like this. At first I hovered over the delete key. It would have been easy. Safer. No waves. Just let the silence keep humming. But then I thought of Lily, how she'd once asked if co-inventor was a ceremonial title. I thought of Michael sneering about legacy documentation bloat. And I thought of that filing. The wearable haptic sensor module. Frankenstein project that only survived because I'd sat next to Dylan from firmware for 3 weeks and explained how to avoid heat distortion in the embedded wiring. So I replied. Short and professional. Attached the original notes. Signed the verification with my full name, Winter Chapman. That should have been it. But 2 days later the same lawyer replied again. Their tone was different now. Less canned. More curious. They'd cross-referenced my signature with other filings. Seemed I was listed on quite a few. They were compiling a full ledger now, but early indications showed I was tied to several filings that directly affected core valuation algorithms and platform optimization logic. Did I happen to know why none of this was reflected in my current title or equity package? I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that question wasn't really for me. It was for whoever signed the deal. They'd opened the filing cabinet and now the ghosts were walking. Over the next week I watched from my desk as something shifted. The buyer's team started asking questions that made Michael frown a little harder. He stopped walking with that bounce in his step. Meetings ran longer. Legal started whispering in corners again. One of the compliance leads stopped by my cubicle and gave me a weird smile, like he knew something he wasn't sure I knew too. Kept my head down. Just a quiet woman near the copier with a badge that still worked. But deep down a part of me had woken up. Not angry. Not vindictive. Just aware. Because for years I let them believe I was just another pair of heels at a standing desk. A placeholder. A fossil. A nice to have. But paper doesn't lie. And signatures don't fade. And once the lawyers get curious, there's no hiding what's been buried. Not when it's filed, time-stamped, and signed by the ghost they tried to erase. It was a Tuesday when the binder showed up. Thick, ugly, branded with a sticker that read, Preliminary IP Ledger. Internal review only. I didn't see it myself. Not at first. But whispers travel faster than bandwidth in a nervous office. And by noon, I'd heard from 3 different directions that something in the due diligence documents had spooked VenturePath's legal team. Apparently one of their junior counsels, some poor soul tasked with vetting our patent filings, had hit a recursion loop. The name Winter Chapman kept surfacing. Not once, not twice, but 53 times across filings ranging from early hardware modules to the machine learning routines we'd retrofitted for compliance automation. My name was on patents that directly touched every major product line they were valuing. That IP binder may as well have been a biography. The problem? I wasn't on any leadership chart. I wasn't listed on any equity agreement. Hell, on the org chart I was still a floating box marked, admin support, logistics, like I ordered toner and baked cupcakes for birthdays. VenturePath didn't like that. Big money never does. They wanted clean lines. Authority maps. Ownership trails. Instead they found a phantom with fingerprints all over the product. No contract saying I didn't own a damn thing. So I said nothing. I watched Michael get pulled into an unscheduled call with legal. Watched his posture change. Cocky to coiled. His voice dropped an octave. He started using words like oversight and clerical error. By mid-afternoon he was in the glass conference room, pacing behind frosted windows, gesturing wildly with a dry erase marker he wasn't using. I sat 2 feet from the coffee machine sorting mail. Later that day Lily stopped by my cubicle. She had that look, like someone had handed her a live grenade labeled, mentorship opportunity. Hey, so, she started, voice syrupy. Do you know anything about patent co-authorship? I guess there's some confusion. Like your name's on a ton of filings. I didn't look up. I just kept organizing the stack of compliance memos in front of me. That's what happens when you write them, I said. Measured. Like I was explaining how to use the copy machine without jamming it. Oh. She blinked. Like you really wrote them? I nodded. Still not looking up. Every word that wasn't in code. She left in silence. Michael tried damage control. I heard through the wall, his voice half laughing, trying to charm someone over speakerphone. She's just admin, he said. Probably a legacy filing issue. We'll clean it up. Just admin. Like I hadn't sat in the war room when we pivoted the platform toward B2B. Like I hadn't drafted the response to that compliance warning that could have tanked our funding round. Like I hadn't filed 3 patents in 1 week to protect an API logic tree that he still didn't understand. That's when the silence stopped being passive. It became armor. I didn't storm into meetings. Didn't bang fists on tables. I just straightened my back, sharpened my replies, and waited. Because I knew the binder wasn't the end of it. It was the beginning. A door cracked open and the lawyers had peeked in. Now they'd want answers. Real ones. Not from a VP with shoe polish charm and buzzwords for blood, but from the woman whose name had started showing up where it mattered most. On the intellectual spine of the company they were about to pay $1 billion for. And I had no intention of whispering when it came time to speak. They summoned me like a ghost. No warning. No calendar invite. No polite when you have a moment. Just a knock on my cubicle wall from H. Kara, the one who always called me Winnie, even though I never gave her permission. She smiled like someone apologizing for a dog bite. They need you upstairs. Right now. Upstairs. Where the real glass is. Where people speak in deal sizes and not deliverables. I took the stairs, not the elevator. Needed the walk. Needed the quiet. When I opened the door to the smaller conference room, the one with the bad Bluetooth speakerphone and dead ficus in the corner, Michael was already pacing. Lily sat beside him like a shadow, still trying to grow into her role. Legal was there too. 2 seats down. Holding a tablet like it was radioactive. No one offered me a seat. Michael launched in immediately. All smile, no sincerity. Hey Winter. Just need to clear something up real quick. Bit of confusion on some of the filings. He said filings, the way someone says hangnail or spilled coffee. Trivial. Inconvenient. The buyer's team flagged your name on some patents. Looks like a clerical issue. We're going to submit a clarification packet, he continued, already shifting papers toward me. Just something formal that says you were support, not contributor. You know, standard stuff. That's when I reached into my bag. No theatrics. No slow-motion drama. Just a soft slide of paper on laminate. A printed copy of the original filing for the haptic sensor module. The one that had started this avalanche. It had signatures from Dylan, me, and our former CTO. Co-inventor acknowledgement in black ink. Time-stamped. Certified. And ambiguous. Michael's face stiffened like a mask mid-melt. You're listed as co-inventor. Legal mumbled like it was a dare to himself. I nodded. Because I am. The room felt suddenly smaller. Michael gave a weak chuckle. Yeah, but look, it's a gray area, right? I mean, contributions don't always equal ownership. You probably didn't intend. You used me, I cut in. Not loud. Just surgical. You used my work. You used my knowledge. You used my silence. Lily blinked hard, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, then didn't. I didn't ask for my name to be there, I continued, but your legal team put it there because it was cleaner than fighting for the rights after the fact. They knew I authored the language. They knew I translated the architecture. And now that your buyer noticed, you want me to say I didn't exist. Legal cleared his throat. We need to pause here. Everyone turned to him. We've received a formal request from VenturePath's legal counsel. They're asking for clarification on Miss Chapman's role, title history, and compensation package. They've also requested documentation on patent vesting agreements. Until that's resolved, they're pausing IP diligence review. Michael's mouth opened, then closed. HR's tablet slipped an inch from her lap. I folded my hands. Not smug. Just still. I wasn't angry. That would have been easy. I was precise. You want me to disclaim authorship? I said. What you should be doing is checking the valuation model. Because if they're smart, and they are, they've already redlined your numbers based on the assumption I'm the only one who actually understands what you're selling. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I stood to leave. No mic drop. Just a simple, let me know when you need the other filings verified. There are 52 more. As I reached the door, I heard legal whisper to Michael, you didn't have her under contract. And in that moment I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No fury. Just cold clarity. Because when someone tries to erase you after building an empire with your hands, they don't just risk embarrassment. They risk exposure. And baby, the lawyers were just getting started. It was the email that did it. Not the 5-alarm panic flaring in legal's inbox. Not the sudden vanishing of Michael from Slack. Not even the whispering huddle I saw between HR and comms near the vending machines. No, it was the plain, unstyled 2-sentence email from the founder himself. Subject line, boardroom. Now. That told me the scaffolding was starting to buckle. He hadn't emailed me in months. Not since my reclassification. Not since I got relocated to the cubicle zone where hope went to die. But now the man who once called me his Swiss Army knife and lipstick wanted a meeting. In person. No assistant. No buffer. Just, can you come to the boardroom? Something had ruptured. By the time I got upstairs, the energy in the office had gone full crime scene. You could feel the blame moving around the building like a virus looking for a weak host. Michael's office door was closed. Legal's lights were on at 7 p.m. VenturePath's due diligence portal had gone from in review to on hold. The founder met me at the door himself. He looked tired. Collar unbuttoned. Expression tight. Winter, he said, his voice lower than I remembered. We need to talk. Inside. It wasn't just him. Legal was there. Sure was there. So was the director of compliance who wouldn't meet my eyes. And in the middle of it all, that godforsaken binder sat open like a wound. A sticky note on top read, 53 filings, named Inventor W. Chapman. They didn't offer me a chair, so I pulled one for myself. Legal started. He was the same guy who'd once told me to use passive voice in filings because it sounds less female. We've confirmed the documents, he said, almost apologetic. They're valid. USPTO records back them up. Winner, you're not just listed. You're the named contributor in more than half of them. The buyer flagged this as a significant exposure point. The founder turned to me. Why didn't you say anything? I shrugged. You didn't ask. Michael finally slithered in 10 minutes late. Face flushed. Collar wilted. He tried smiling like the fire wasn't already in his lap. Winter, this is obviously a misunderstanding. We're just trying to keep the narrative clear for the buyer. It's not personal. I looked at him and said, if it were personal, you'd be thanking me for not leaking the fact that your equity prospectus is built on intellectual property you tried to bury in a cubicle. Itcher jumped in then, voice sweet like Splenda. We've been reviewing your compensation structure. We feel confident we can make this right. Retroactive acknowledgement. Maybe a spot bonus. No, Legal interrupted, pinching the bridge of his nose. It's not that simple. She's not just owed acknowledgement. Based on the filings, the contribution language, and the lack of work-for-hire agreements for that period, she owns part of it. The founder went pale. The patents. Legal nodded slowly. We didn't lock them down properly. Not all of them. That was when the room changed. The buyer's lawyers had made their move. They weren't just asking for clarification anymore. They were pausing everything. The acquisition clock had stopped ticking. The data room was closed. No more calls. No more investor updates. VenturePath had sent one line. We will resume diligence once ownership rights are verified by the named inventor. That's what they called me now. Not admin support. Not legacy staff. Not Winter from Ops. Named inventor. I should have felt triumphant. I should have screamed, flipped the table, demanded stock options, or laughed until my lungs gave out. But all I did was sit back, cross my legs, and say, well, it's not clean, is it? Michael opened his mouth to speak again, but the founder raised a hand. Don't, he said. Quiet. Measured. You've said enough. And that's when I knew they weren't calling me in to silence me. They were calling me in because I was the last thing holding the deal together. Or the first thing that could burn it to ash. They scheduled the meeting for 10 a.m. sharp. No one ever does that unless blood's about to be drawn or wired. The kind of meeting where the air in the hallway feels heavier. The kind where executive assistants hover just a little too close to the conference door, pretending to check calendars when they're really hoping to catch a live implosion. The boardroom was already full when I walked in. No small talk. No nervous smiles. Just silence except for the soft thunk of a leather binder being laid on the table by VenturePath's lead counsel. A silver-haired woman with courtroom eyes and zero tolerance for bull. She didn't waste time. She turned the binder toward the founder, flipped it open to a tab labeled IP Lead Roles, and pulled out a page so thick with yellow highlighter it looked radioactive. 53 patents, she said, voice flat. 53 filings submitted over a 9-year period. All tied to core valuation areas. Infrastructure logic. Product optimization systems. Platform compliance. Adaptive learning modules. All filed under Chapman Winter. Listed as lead contributor. Designated inventor. Several filings with sole authorship. She slid the page forward like she was dealing cards in a game where everyone else had already folded. Then she turned slowly toward Michael. You're selling us a company she essentially owns. Michael blinked. Smiled. Tried to chuckle. That's not exactly accurate. Winter was admin support. These filings must be administrative input. Formwork filing artifacts. He looked around the room for backup. None came. The buyer's lawyer didn't blink. Is that your legal position? The founder opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I let the silence sit for just a beat longer. Then I leaned forward, slow and even, and said, would you like me to explain the filing tree? Every eye in the room turned to me. For once, not with dismissal or indifference, but with attention. Like I was a map they suddenly realized they'd been using upside down. I reached across and pulled the binder slightly toward me. Flipped to the first flag tab. Patent hash US 1198423B. Adaptive sensory throttling for embedded wearables. I remember drafting the prototype claim in a cafe at 2 a.m. while Dylan panicked over voltage bleed. This one, I said calmly, was based on a firmware constraint Dylan couldn't resolve. I drafted the workaround. Engineering approved it. Legal submitted it. I reviewed the claim language and added the co-inventor clause myself. I flipped to the next. And the next. Each one a breadcrumb in the trail they tried to sweep under a rug. This one, I said, tapping the filing for our compliance logic engine, was the reason we passed the 2020 audit. Michael's predecessor at the time wanted to license a third-party solution. I built this one with 5 engineers and no budget. Saved the company $2.3 million. The buyer's lawyer nodded. Your name's on the source notes. I smiled. Small. Tired. Of course it is. Michael looked like someone had unplugged him. He turned to legal, to HR, to the founder. But no one met his eyes. Because it was done. Because the truth wasn't debatable anymore. Because in that room, in that moment, every name tag, title, and corner office had just become irrelevant. All that mattered was authorship. And it belonged to me. The buyer's lawyer leaned back, tapped the binder once and said, "Until this is resolved, our valuation model is under suspension. We are not in the business of acquiring assets with contested ownership. Especially when the contested party is still employed and present." Then she looked at me. Direct. Measured. "Miss Chapman, would you be willing to join us for a private follow-up? We'd like to understand your role more accurately." I nodded. The founder finally spoke. Quietly. "She'll be there." But I didn't need his permission. Because somewhere along the way they forgot that silence isn't surrender. It's a strategy. And mine had just paid off with interest. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate backpedaling. Slack channels went dark. Calendars cleared themselves like digital tumbleweeds blowing through a desert of panic. HR's tone turned syrupy sweet. Legal developed a sudden case of radio silence. Michael? Well, Michael stopped showing up entirely. No one said fired. Not yet. But when his company laptop disappeared from the IT shelf, everyone knew the guillotine had finally whispered sh-thunk. VenturePath formally paused the acquisition the following morning. No grand announcement. Just a short, polite statement. Pending clarification of material IP ownership and inventor compensation, due diligence will be suspended indefinitely. The kind of sentence that detonates investor calls and erases 2 months of hype in 5 words. The board called an emergency session. I wasn't invited. At least not initially. They met behind closed doors. CEO present. Legal sweating through his collar. HR trying to spin a narrative about internal miscommunication and legacy documentation confusion. But the buyer's legal rep wouldn't budge. She kept pointing to the binder. To the signatures. To me. Not as a victim. As an asset. The founder emerged 2 hours later looking 10 years older. He didn't make eye contact when he approached my desk. Just said, "Winter, we'd like you to rejoin the leadership team. Effective immediately." I waited a beat then replied, "What's the title?" He hesitated just long enough to sting then said, "Chief Innovation Officer." I nodded. "Put it in writing." He already had it printed. I didn't ask about Michael. I didn't need to. His name was already being erased from the internal directory by the time I walked upstairs. All his little pet initiatives labeled on hold. Lily reassigned to documentation support. Back where she should have started. At noon I entered the boardroom again. This time I wasn't asked to wait in the hallway. This time I didn't sit near the coffee machine. I took the seat at the head of the IP review table. The chair they once told me I didn't need. The one they left empty out of habit and ego. The buyer's CEO was there now. First time in person. He looked at the founder briefly then turned to me with a nod that said everything. "You're the one we came for." I opened the binder. My binder. "Shall we begin?" I asked. And no one said a word. No fireworks. No tears. No one screamed or begged or ran out of the room. Because real power doesn't arrive with sound. It arrives with silence. And silence, when held long enough, becomes gravity. I never raised my voice. I never leaked a file. I never posted a thread or staged a coup or rallied for allies in back channels. I just documented. Witnessed. Filed. And when the time came I let the paperwork speak. The due diligence meeting lasted 4 hours. VenturePath brought in their entire IP counsel team, 3 lawyers, 2 analysts, and a valuation specialist who looked like he hadn't slept since discovering my name. They walked through every filing, every signature, every contribution clause. I answered their questions with the same calm precision I'd used for 9 years. No embellishment. No drama. Just facts. This module, who designed the logic tree? I did. Engineering implemented it. This compliance framework, who drafted the initial protocol? I did. Legal reviewed it. This adaptive learning algorithm, who translated the concept into patent language? I did. The data scientist provided the technical specs. On and on. For 4 hours. Michael's replacement, some interim VP they'd pulled from operations, sat in the corner taking notes. He didn't say a word. Didn't ask a single question. Just watched me dismantle the narrative they'd built around my erasure. By hour 3, the buyer's lead counsel leaned back and said, "Miss Chapman, I'm going to be direct. Based on what we're seeing here, you're not just a contributor to this company's IP portfolio. You're the architect." I didn't smile. Didn't nod. Just said, "I know." She glanced at the founder. Then why was she listed as administrative support? The founder opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. That was a recent change. A restructuring decision. By whom? Silence. The lawyer pressed. Who made the decision to reclassify Miss Chapman? More silence. Finally, legal spoke up. His voice thin. Michael Barrett. The former VP of operations. Where is he now? No longer with the company. The lawyer made a note. Then turned back to me. "Miss Chapman, I need to ask you something directly and I need you to be honest. Do you believe you hold any ownership rights to the patents filed under your name?" The room went still. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not about what I wanted. About what was true. "I don't know," I said finally. "I was never given a work-for-hire agreement. I was never asked to sign away my rights. I was never told I couldn't claim ownership. Legal put my name on the filings because they said it was cleaner. I assumed that meant the company retained full rights. But I never saw a document that said so." The lawyer nodded slowly. "That's what we thought." She closed her tablet. Looked at the founder. "We're going to need a full legal review. Independent counsel. Every filing where Miss Chapman is named. Every agreement she signed or didn't sign. Every email, memo, or document that clarifies, or fails to clarify, ownership rights." The founder's face went gray. "How long will that take?" "Weeks. Maybe months. And until it's resolved, we can't proceed with the acquisition. The risk is too high." She stood. The rest of her team followed. "We'll be in touch." And just like that, they were gone. The aftermath was swift and surgical. The board convened again that night. Emergency session. I wasn't invited to that one either, but I didn't need to be. I could read the writing on the wall from my newly assigned office. The corner one with the view, the one that used to belong to Michael. By morning, the company had hired outside counsel. A specialist in IP ownership disputes. They wanted to settle this quickly, quietly, before word got out that their billion-dollar acquisition was being held hostage by a woman they tried to bury in admin. The lawyer they hired was sharp. Professional. She met with me in a conference room that smelled like new carpet and desperation. "Miss Chapman," she said, "I've been retained to help resolve the ownership question around the patents you're listed on. I want to be clear. I represent the company, not you. You may want to retain your own counsel." I nodded. "I'm aware." "Good. Now I've reviewed the filings. I've also reviewed your employment history. And I'll be direct. You have a very strong case for ownership rights. Possibly stronger than the company's." She slid a folder across the table. "This is what the company is prepared to offer. A settlement. Full acknowledgement of your contributions. Retroactive equity based on your role as a key inventor. A seat on the board. And a guarantee that your title and compensation reflect your actual value to the organization." I opened the folder. Scanned the numbers. It was generous. More than generous. It was the kind of offer that could set someone up for life. But it wasn't about the money. "What about the patents?" I asked. She hesitated. "The company retains full ownership. But you would be acknowledged as the inventor on all official documentation. And you'd receive royalty participation on any licensing agreements moving forward. I closed the folder. Pushed it back across the table. No. Her eyebrows lifted. No. I don't want royalties. I don't want a board seat. I want clarity. I want every patent filing reviewed. And I want documentation, signed, sealed legal documentation, that confirms who owns what. If the company owns them, fine. But I'm not signing away potential rights I might have just to make a deal happen faster. She studied me for a long moment. Then nodded slowly. You should definitely get your own lawyer. I did. Her name was Diane Fletcher. Former USPTO examiner turned IP attorney. She had a reputation for being ruthless, methodical, and expensive. I didn't care about the cost. I cared about the truth. Diane spent 2 weeks reviewing every document, every filing, every scrap of paper with my name on it. She interviewed former colleagues. Pulled email threads from backup servers. Built a timeline of my contributions that read like a corporate thriller. When she finally sat down with me, her expression was unreadable. Winter, she said, you've got them by the throat. I blinked. Meaning you co-authored or solely authored 53 patents over 9 years. 23 of those were filed before you signed any employment agreement that included IP assignment language. Another 15 were filed during a period where your agreement had expired and hadn't been renewed. The remaining 15 are gray area, but given the contribution language and lack of explicit work-for-hire clauses, you've got a credible claim to joint ownership on almost all of them. I sat back. Let that sink in. So what does that mean? Practically. She leaned forward. It means the company can't sell without your consent. It means VenturePath can't close the acquisition without resolving your ownership claim. And it means you have leverage. Significant leverage. What kind of leverage? She smiled. Small. The kind that lets you name your price. The negotiation took 3 weeks. VenturePath wanted the deal closed. The board wanted the deal closed. The investors wanted the deal closed. But nobody could close anything until I agreed to terms. I didn't go in asking for the moon. I didn't demand a percentage of the sale price or a golden parachute or some kind of vindictive payout. I asked for 3 things. 1. Full recognition as co-inventor on every patent where I contributed. Not buried in footnotes. Not hidden in fine print. Listed. Acknowledged. Permanent. 2. A seat at the table. Not on the board, I didn't want the politics. But a senior leadership role with actual authority. Chief Technology Officer. Direct oversight of IP strategy and product development. A voice that couldn't be silenced or sidelined. 3. Protection. For me and for every other person in the company who'd been quietly doing the work while someone else took the credit. New policies. New agreements. New standards for how contributions were documented and acknowledged. VenturePath's legal team reviewed my demands. Then counteroffered. They'd give me everything I asked for. Plus equity. Plus a retention bonus. Plus a 3-year contract with clauses that made it nearly impossible to push me out. In exchange, I'd sign over my ownership claims and clear the path for the acquisition. Diane looked at the offer and whistled low. This is a hell of a deal, Winter. I read through it twice. Every word. Every clause. Then I looked up and said, they're paying me to go away. She shook her head. No. They're paying you to stay. Big difference. I thought about it. Really thought about it. About the years I'd spent invisible. About the work I'd done in silence. About the people who'd overlooked me, underestimated me, tried to erase me. And about the company I'd helped build. The technology I'd helped create. The future I'd helped architect. I didn't want to burn it down. I never did. I just wanted them to see me. Tell them yes, I said finally. But I want one more thing. What's that? I want a public acknowledgement. Not just in legal documents. In the press release. In the acquisition announcement. I want my name on the story. Not as a footnote. As a co-author. Diane grinned. I'll make it happen. The acquisition closed 6 weeks later. VenturePath paid $1.2 billion for the company. The press release went out at 9 a.m. on a Thursday. And buried in paragraph 4, right between the quotes from the CEO and the buyer, was a single sentence. The transaction was made possible by the foundational intellectual property contributions of Chief Technology Officer Winter Chapman, whose innovative work over the past 9 years has been integral to the company's core platform and valuation. It wasn't much. Just one sentence. But it was there. Permanent. Public. True. I read it 3 times. Then closed my laptop and walked to the window. From my office, the real one, the corner one with the view, I could see the whole city stretched out below. The buildings where other people were working. Fighting. Building. Surviving. And I thought about all the invisible people in all those buildings. The ones doing the work. Holding things together. Making it all run. The ones whose names never make it into the press releases. I couldn't change the system for all of them. But maybe, just maybe, I'd cracked it open a little. Made a space. Proved it was possible. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane. Congrats, Cito. Don't spend it all in one place. I smiled. Type back. Wasn't planning on it. Because the thing about winning isn't the money. It isn't the title. It isn't even the recognition. It's knowing that when they tried to erase you, you had the receipts. And when the moment came, you didn't flinch. You just pulled out the binder, opened it to the right page and said, "Actually, that's my name.